It has been another tumultuous week in the news. The assassination of General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad. President Trump speaking in Kendall to a huge audience of Christian evangelicals. So we have got a lot of ground to cover with the roundtable. Let me tell you who is with us today. We've got a great one. Dara Schottenfeld is a politically engaged, civically attuned attorney in Broward County. She is a partner in the David J. Schottenfeld firm in Plantation, former member of the Broward Young Democrats. Mark Lapointe is a partner at the Pillsbury Law Firm in Miami. He is a former federal prosecutor, a Marine veteran of the Gulf War. Fernand Amandi, an old friend, is a professional pollster and political pundit. Used to host a terrific radio program. I used to like to listen to it. He leads the Ben-Dixon Amandi firm in Coconut Grove. Welcome to all of you. Dara, great to have you join us here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's begin with sort of the huge story of the week. And Mark Lapointe, given your military experience and I think given your judgment, here I think the country is just in a kind of on tenterhooks right now after the assassination of General Soleimani and wondering, the president says, I did this to prevent a war, not to start a war, and we're all waiting to see, what Iran is going to do. They have vowed profound revenge upon this country. What do you think?
Well, first of all, my first reaction is Soleimani was a bad man. Mm-hmm. He has caused tremendous harm to our country, to our servicemen. In fact, he has been responsible for a number of deaths, American lives in Iraq. He has been literally the lead as sort of the proxy behind a proxy fight between Iran and the United States.
Right, the architect for Hezbollah and all those other militias.
Absolutely. So there's really no, I don't think anyone is sitting here thinking, well, we've lost a good person in the world. Having said that, however, we do need to ask some questions. One of the questions we need to ask is whether or not the killing of Soleimani actually presented more risk to this country than not. Some of the questions we need to ask, in fact, well, first of all, we need to support, my view of the world as a former military, we need to support our country, we need to support our president when he comes out and basically says, we have identified someone who presents grave risk to our country and we needed to do something about it. Having said that, though, we do need to be skeptical about, in fact, whether or not the reason he's provided is in fact a legitimate reason. We haven't heard yet what is the basis for this.
All right, and I want to pursue that point, Dara. I mean, what the President, Mike Pompeo, have said is that this man posed an imminent threat to our military, our diplomats abroad and at home throughout the Middle East, and yet we have yet to hear specifically what the imminent threat was.
You're not going to hear what the imminent threat was because there wasn't an imminent threat. The timing of this wasn't strange considering the history of the Trump presidency. It's a wag the dog situation. He wants a distraction from his impeachment, and he's gotten it. This is what we're talking about today. We're no longer talking about what he's done wrong. I've seen and read that it was based on razor thin evidence, and they haven't even presented that yet.
Yeah. Well, Fernand Amandi, we have read, the Washington Post had an excellent piece about this where he had flown down to Mar-a-Lago and that his military advisors and Pompeo and his national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, were in the room, and they presented this sort of list of options of things he could do, and killing Soleimani was one of several, and he sort of pointed and said, let's do that, and people were amazed, taken aback, because they thought, since both Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama had refused to do that, thinking it would widen the war, they were shocked by that.
Well, I think it was a shocking act, and I think Mark is right. One in the American experience has always, regardless of their own personal party affiliation, been able to line up behind the actions of a president, whether they be Republican or Democrat, to protect the national interest. The problem, Michael, and it's interesting that you cite the Washington Post, is that that paper and other papers across the United States have documented the loss of credibility of this president who has lied, documented falsehoods and lies, over 13,000 examples. So before, despite what our partisan positions were, we would have listened to what a president said and taken them at their word and given them the benefit of the doubt. This president and this administration operates in bad faith, lies with no compunction, and that's why it's difficult to take them at face value now in a situation like this.
Yeah, but Mark Lapointe, to your point earlier, which is a good one, which is when the lives of American military men and women and our diplomats, and there are thousands of them in Iraq right now who are in peril, the historic way that Americans work is when the president says, you know, we are in a crisis, is to get behind him and, you know, make sure that those lives, American lives, are not lost.
And that is the key thing for me. I mean, we know who fights these wars, right? We know who are there.
Guys like you when you wore a uniform.
Sure, lots of folks like me and others who basically go out there and put their lives on the line. So we do, and I understand, look, we do need to question, we do need a certain amount of skepticism. I myself, when I first heard of this, my first reaction was the notion of actually killing someone who was so high in the Iranian government itself demanded serious consideration. For me, it was almost like, imagine if the Iranians decided they're going to kill our defense secretary or joint chief of staff. There's no question that would not be allowed. Now, having said that, there's so many questions around this, whether or not, in fact, the organization that he was in charge of, whether or not it was a terrorist organization. There's so many factors. So my initial reaction is, yes, I agree. President Trump does not merit the grant of any credibility, because we know that he's lied about so many things, small and large. But having said that, I would wait to just hear how the facts come out over the next few days, what exactly his administration submits as to the purpose, the reason why he felt compelled to actually engage in that sort of an act, which will have huge consequences. The Iranians are not going to fight a conventional war. You're not going to see Iranians planes coming down Miami. What they're going to do is they're going to do all kinds of unconventional wars to make life very, very difficult for us.
Yeah, but having said that, I have to say, and I have no knowledge whatsoever, you know, Fernand, here we're going to have a Super Bowl in Miami in, what, 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks. And if there were a symbol of Americana, I mean, it is the Super Bowl, and I mean, the security was already going to be razor tight. I mean, it was going to be...
Well, it's not just the Super Bowl. Yes, that's the prime target, but the fact that President Trump spent so much of his time here in South Florida, he's here now at Mar-a-Lago, probably watching this broadcast.
Well,
What
I
happens?
hope he is.
Yeah, I'm sure he is, Michael. You know he is. And what happens the moment that there is an action that could impact all of our families directly? Then do you look and you place the blame of responsibility on a president who perhaps acted recklessly in this case? We all know that there are many bad men and women around the world with blood on their hands, but there are consequences to actions. I'm offended by the presence of Raul Castro in Cuba, who has destroyed so many families in this region. Does that mean we should go in and assassinate him right now and deal with the potential consequences of that? I'm not sure. To the military's perspective, we have to think about the American blood and treasure that is exposed when actions like this are taken.
Dara, back to your point about impeachment. This week, we saw that late in the week that there still is no agreement between Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell about how this trial is going to take place.
Which is very surprising because they typically get along so well.
No, they are at odds all the time. But I think there's collegiality. You think, well, I think that there is. Well, I don't know. It looks like
You have a little
collegiality.
more faith than I do.
Yeah. But do you think that in the end that there are going to be witnesses that will be allowed?
Yes, I do. I think that the American people will not stand for a fake process. I think even Republicans know that there needs to be some semblance of fairness or it's going to mark the Republican Party forever. And they're already in enough trouble as far as I'm concerned. And I think America wants it and America is going to demand it. And yes, I believe in the end that there will be witnesses.
Yeah, well, most trials have witnesses, so let's see if this one does. All right, everybody hold your thoughts. Stay with us at home. We'll be back in just a minute with more Roundtable. Welcome back. We are in the midst of a very good roundtable here. Mark Lapointe, Miami attorney with the Pillsbury firm, Dara Schottenfeld from Broward County, and Fernand Amandi. Fernand, on Friday afternoon, late in the afternoon, I was there at the King Jesus Ministry International in Kendall, an amazing church. It's a beautiful, huge facility. Today, as on most Sundays, they're going to have 7,000 people attending services there, led by Apostle Maldonado, Guillermo Maldonado, who is really a charismatic figure. I guess my question is, it seems to me on its face that it's an odd coupling, a kind of a strange marriage between Donald Trump, a famous libertine in most of his life, and Christian evangelicals. How do you put that together?
You know, it is bizarre because he is arguably the most impious man to ever serve in public life. And on top of that, what makes that church in particular, I mean, policy-wise, he has been undoubtedly the most anti-Hispanic president that the United States have ever seen.
And anti-immigration, and most of the people at that church are immigrants.
That's correct.
And many of them are undocumented.
That is absolutely correct. But I think, Michael, what that appearance by the president there at that church speaks to are two things, or three things actually. Number one, it was a reaction, a desperate reaction to that very unexpected editorial that came out in Christianity Today. Right. Billy Graham's founded magazine that basically said Donald Trump should not just be impeached, he should be removed. Right. He is an offense to anyone who considers himself an evangelical Christian. They set this event up in Florida, and that checks three boxes for them. We know Florida is a must-win for the Trump campaign. Right. South Florida, to the extent that they can peel off Hispanic votes, independent voters, that's going to be just sweet spot voting for them. And on top of that, the president is basically spending so much of his time now. He's now a Florida resident. It was an easy little trek for him to get down there and do that.
Yeah. Mark Lapointe, there were about 5,000 people in that church. And when I say they idolized Donald Trump, I mean the level of respect, love for this man, and he loved them back. I mean, and he was powerful, connected with them, ticked off all the issues that are important to them. He is pro-life, he's pro-conservative judges, he is pro-Israel. Everything that's important to evangelicals, he listed, and you can see why they do support him.
You know, certainly I don't speak for all Christians. I certainly can't speak for all people of faith, because clearly people of faith are not a monolithic group. But I would say it is one of the most phenomenal things that I've experienced, I've observed over the number of years since Trump. I think as Christians, if you go through any church right now, right, any house of worship, what are the things they're talking about? They're talking about the fundamental principle of faith. That is, there is a certain, not a requirement, the underlying rock is morality. Mm-hmm. And in fact, if you're a Christian, 1 Corinthians 15:33, that says, if you basically hang out with folks without morality, then you will be tempted. So to me, it's been really strange, that sort of that adulation that has existed between the Christians, the evangelicals, and Trump. And part of me, though, is for years, for decades, we've heard about family values, how Christians have actually talked about the importance of family values. You shouldn't lie, you shouldn't cheat, you shouldn't commit adultery, all of those things that, frankly, although they're Christian principles, they're basic fundamental principle of how to live with each other. Right. And basically now, the evangelicals have said, guess what? We're going to align ourselves with someone who actually is the antithesis of all those principles. And my question for the evangelicals group is, how do you ever get back from that? How do you go back to your community now and says, it is okay now? I mean, all the things we've been teaching as Christians now, they still matter. How do you tell your children now? I mean, would you trust your children with
Well, there was, I have to say, an answer at one point. There were 8 members of the clergy who prayed for him, a laying on of hands. It was really quite moving. And what one of them, I think it was Pastor Maldonado, said was, we know he is a sinner, but we love him. And, if he accepts Jesus, as his Savior, then we can be with him. I mean, it was a generous Christian message of redemption.
It really was. especially considering that this is a man who says he never apologizes for anything.
Yeah.
Evangelicals support Republicans because of Israel mostly.
Yeah. Yeah, because when the rapture comes, you want to be on the right side.
Yeah, I mean, they get raptured up and we burn. I mean, my people are aware of it. But I remember them calling out Obama. I mean, calling him the Antichrist. And here's a man who has been with his wife forever. He's a family man, an actual family man. And then the hypocrisy of supporting a man that is the opposite of moral. I mean, immoral doesn't even cover him. It's astounding.
Well, he is, as I said earlier, however, they forgive him and he's right on their issues. So hold your thoughts. We'll have more to say about the president and hear a soundbite from him. We'll be back with more Roundtable in just a minute. Welcome back. We are in the midst of another Roundtable, having a really good conversation. We were talking about President Trump in Kendall on Friday, and there was something he said that I admired a lot. It sort of refers to the theme earlier where we were talking about anti-Semitism. Let's listen to the president.
We're going to eradicate the sinister scourge of anti-Semitism. And we will protect Jewish communities and all members of the Jewish faith from the wicked forces of hatred and violence.
All right, Dara, there you go. That's the kind of thing you want the president to say, but you're shaking your head.
Because more than wanting him to say it, I want him to mean it. This is the same man who, after Charlottesville, said that there were very good people on both sides. He's supported by David Duke. Him standing there and saying, oh, anti-Semitism is bad, while refusing to speak out and say, no, I don't want your support, is beyond the pale. He's not telling the truth for a change.
You know, Fernand, one of the things I have to say that I found, he's powerfully connects. The guy, when he is on and speaking to an audience, it's really an amazing experience to listen to him. But you know, right when he was on a roll, suddenly he started talking about Hillary Clinton again. Goodness, that was 3 years ago. I mean, you know, he talked about Beto O'Rourke. He called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. He called Pete Buttigieg, whose name he mispronounced and sort of ridiculed, Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine.
Well, that's very Christian behavior in the church, isn't it? To just start insulting people left and right, Michael?
I guess the question is this the tone of the 2020 election?
Oh, it's been the tone of Donald Trump his entire life. I think, unfortunately, it's harbinger for what we're going to see. And look, let's give the devil his due. His comments about anti-Semitism, I think, are to be applauded. I just don't think it can end at the level of anti-Semitism. Hate crimes across the board against Muslims, against Jews, against even folks that are not of faith have increased substantially over the last 3 years of his presidency. And I think it's important that those words are supported by acts. I'll give you a quick example here in South Florida. We had a situation last year where there was a South Florida police officer who was found engaging in anti-Semitic conduct.
Right. He was throwing the Jewish Hebrew Bible, you know, dismissively into a
and literally
truck.
Called it trash. Let's toss this trash.
Yeah.
The chief of police of Miami at the time, Jorge Colina, could have gone many different routes. He took a zero tolerance approach, fired the officer immediately and said, look, we have to put these issues on the table and deal with them in real time. Not just talk about them, but effectively deal with them. I think that's the type of thing we need. Colina's been the greatest, I think, so far in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. You know, before we run out of time, I think we need to sort of remark that, Mark, here we are, a new year, a new decade. Let me ask you to kind of look over the horizon a little bit and say, here's something I see coming in 2020, which is going to be good for our community. Let me just begin by saying, I think that we have a lot of elected leaders now who really recognize that climate change is just a crisis and will be addressed. And I think $200 million for Everglades restoration is just terrific. So I'm kind of encouraged about that.
Well, I'm generally an optimistic, positive person in any event. So I tend to see life sort of the glass is half full. But I think even in the midst of our most difficult time, we can see some good things. When we talk about some of the things that that the Jewish community has been gone through right now, I think it's an opportunity for all of us as Americans to basically engage at a higher level, right? My sense of things is when we talk about some of the hate that's been going on, it is not merely a concern just for the Jewish community, right? It is an American concern, and I believe that folks from all kinds of faith, from all creeds and colors, will have an opportunity now to basically speak up against those things, because frankly, the hate that the Jewish community is experiencing now, it does not stop at the doors of
it
the
does
Jews.
not, and
I
it's
think
intolerable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Dara, what do you see that makes you feel encouraged?
Probably the involvement of women in the political process. I think that there's a level of compassion that comes with when women lead. I find that women are lifting each other up more than ever.
Yeah.
I am greatly encouraged by where women are heading in 2020.
I'm afraid that's going to be the last word. Saw Little Women last night. Pretty darn good, too. I would encourage you all. All right, Fernand, Dara, and Mark, thank you for coming in.